I think happily we've gotten to a point where we enjoy these stories, and we, thanks to nature channels on cable, we know a lot more about animals and the wonderful things they do, the cute things, the adorable things, the clever things that they do. And we appreciate their beauty. But, and here is the million-dollar question, what about farm animals? What about farm animals? It's one thing to talk about the owls and the dogs and the higher mammals, the dolphins and even the chimps and the gorillas. But somehow, when the topic of farm animals comes up, that wall also comes up. And the defense mechanisms are triggered. The biggest of those defense mechanisms is ignorance. That is to say, we want to ignore it. We don't want to hear it because it means that if we hear it, and if we recognize the urgency of looking at the plight of these farm animals, then we also recognize the urgency of looking at our own diet, and it's not convenient. It would mean rethinking our habits, rethinking our comfort foods, and it's easier simply to push it aside and just not talk about it. And it's unfortunate because, and here's where I get into the animal segment of this presentation, it's unfortunate because they are kept in such ways, such torturous, barbarous ways, that it's like a death camp. It really is. And the horror of it all is that there are no laws governing the treatment of animals raised for food. I think this is where we put up our wall. As soon as we bring that up, the wall of division goes up. The wall of ignorance goes up. We'd rather ignore it. We'd rather not hear it because it means that if we take it seriously and if we consider the sad, horrible, torturous way in which they're kept, then we would have to at the same time reflect on our own diet choices, our own meat-based diet that sustains that industry, that allows them to be kept in these conditions that's really just like a death camp. They're there, and there are no laws governing the way animals raised for food are kept. Absolutely no laws. Sure, there are laws that protect endangered species. Sure, such a thing called the Animal Welfare Act exists. But animals raised for food don't count. In a book by Peter Singer, he states that there is no federal law governing the welfare of farmed animals on the farm. Literally nothing. In the U.S., federal law begins only when animals are transported or arrive at the slaughterhouse, and even then there is no law regarding the slaughter of chickens or other birds. The industry has been quoted as saying that, and here I quote, "The less consumers know about what happens to the animals before they reached their plates, the better." And I'm simply going to quote a passage from a textbook I used to use in my ethics classes, indicating the point of view from a factory farm. Actually, a journalist who went undercover to observe a factory farm said this: "Animals are no more than machines, milk machines, piglet machines, egg machines, production units converting themselves into profits. The factory farm today is a crowded, stinking bedlam, filled with suffering animals that are quite literally insane, sprayed with pesticides, and fattened on a diet of growth stimulants, antibiotics, and drugs. 250,000 laying hens are confined within a single building." And that was a journalist, and how she managed to put what she saw into words after visiting one of these factory farms. One meat company manager described a breeding sow as a valuable piece of machinery whose function is to pump out baby pigs like a sausage machine. And to this end, for at least 10 months out of the year, the pregnant and nursing sow or mother machine is isolated in a narrow pen, in which she is unable to turn around. She is impregnated forcefully, often by being tethered to a rape rack for easy access. For actual undercover footage of how animals are treated in these places, these horrible places that no school goes to for field trips, I recommend a video narrated by Alec Baldwin called Meet Your Meat. M-E-E-T, your M-E-A-T, produced by PETA. It's not pretty, but it's not long either, and it needs to be seen. Even if conditions were different, the way I see things, it's still no different than eating the animals we keep as pets. To me, I don't see a rightful place to draw that line. It's still an animal on your plate. But I've gotten to a point where I don't aim to make the world vegetarian overnight. I think that sets up a finger-pointing, judgmental atmosphere. After all, none of us are perfect. None of us drive the right cars and use the right lawnmowers and use the right light bulbs. But even if we reduced the quantity of meat that we eat in the United States, and we did so as individuals, in a very conscientious way, we would be moving in the right direction. So even a reduction, in the quantity of meat that we eat would point us in the right direction, would help us define our lives with a sense of purpose and morality and true rightfulness. In more sophisticated terms, I always liked philosopher Peter Singer's principle of equal consideration of interests. The principle really shows us why the quantity of meat that we're eating makes no sense morally and cannot be defended. He says that among sentient beings, all of our interests should be counted equally. The only thing that we look at is the strength of those interests, not who has the interests. And so, putting it against the example of meat eating, we see the lack of justification in what we're doing. We see that we are sacrificing their major interests in order to satisfy our minor interests. Or to put it very, very bluntly, we are causing them to sacrifice the desire to simply live, their desire to wander freely, to walk, to live, to roll on the grass, to romp around, to play and do the things that they do. Those are major interests. Interests that have to do with their liberty as beings to simply move and breathe and be and do. And we are sacrificing those major interests in order to satisfy the minor interest, the comparatively minor interest of taste and habit. We don't need to be putting them through what we're putting them through. We won't die. In fact, we'll thrive. We'll enjoy a healthier diet if we stop. So the need isn't there, the justification isn't there. It's only taste and habit that leads us to continue to do it. And we continue to do it by what we buy for lunch. We continue to do it by the choices we make every time we go to the market. And so those minor interests, our habits, are causing a lot of animals to live in situations that are so unbelievably barbaric that most people wouldn't be able to look if they had to. But it's hidden away and they don't have to look.